may you live to be 120. And that's just around the corner, and that'll be our next big celebration. Rayna, this week's Torah portion, it seems fitting and relevant to this exact day. We're in Parshat Va'etchanan this week. And in this week's reading, the people of Israel, they're once again stalling their entry into the land of Israel. They stand on the banks of the Jordan River once again, and Moses ascends a mountain to overlook the promised land. And as he's doing this, he describes the unprecedented miracles of our heritage, including our great exodus from Egypt and our wanderings throughout the desert. Moses at this time predicts the future of the Jewish people, saying that they will one day, upon entering into the land of Israel, they will turn from the laws of their ancestors. But the heaviest content of this week's Torah portion, it comes with Moses and his return to the foundation stone of our faith. Moses will return to talking about the 10 Commandments, naming them each one by one in this week's Torah portion. He'll also recite the Shema prayer, the first time for Moses, and declaring the fundamentals of the Jewish faith with love of God, with the mitzvot, and with the Torah itself. Back to the fundamentals. That should be the title of this week's Torah portion. That should be what it's called. The 10 Commandments, the Shema, these are the pillars of our faith, and they're guarded on either side with unity of God, with love of Torah, and that is the beating heart of our people. You would imagine that the reminder that of these precepts, it would keep the faith of the people of Israel as they entered into the land of Israel. But as we know, memories fade with time. However, the fundamentals of our people regarding our formative events of our history, that is this week in our Torah portion we're talking about. That is very important. It's with the Shema, the commandments, and we talk about love of God, Torah, and Torah study. And I'm reminded of Rayna's legacy as I read this week's Torah portion. It seems extremely relevant. Throughout my first month here at Temple Israel, I've already met with many of our congregants, having lunch with them informally, speaking with them. However, one of the first people who I wanted to meet was going to be Rayna. Why? Even though I hadn't been here yet in Columbus, I had already heard very much about the legacy of both Rabbi Goodman and Rayna. His portrait, after all, stands outside of my office, and now does yours, along with the veranda. Your legacy and memory is vibrant in the minds of our community and our congregation. And what I've learned about Rabbi Goodman has come from word of mouth, from meeting with congregants over a very short period of time, but I'm extremely impressed. And what I can already say is that he established a career on something very special, something that Rayna shares, and that is care for people. It's menschlichkeit. It's food, family, identity. This is what keeps that memory strong in our minds. Earlier this month, I traveled to Atlanta, not too far away, to see some of our congregants. Met with Sidney Simons, Elsie Arno, Babette Rothschild, and Joyce Schwab. And these are some very important names in our congregation. They're historic families of our congregation. I already knew that going into the meeting with them and having lunch with them. But having them to eat across the table with them and seeing them face to face, it was very different. And being there, one of the first things that they wanted to talk about were the memories of Rabbi Goodman and with Rayna. These memories, they included learning how to make challah and cheesecake, and being together and cooking food as a family with Rabbi. To this day, they remember each of the recipes, and on occasion, they will cook them on Shabbat. And I was struck by the devotion of these two people, of Rayna and Rabbi Goodman, to the congregation at that moment. They were so devoted that long after Rabbi Goodman is no longer here, that the memory still lives on. It's been passed on to a new generation, and that devotion is still alive with our congregants, long after they may move out of town or even be out of Columbus. To this day, you both are nourishing the souls of our Jewish community. We often hear a deviation of behind every rabbi is a rebbitzin or a rebbitzman. Rabbi Goodman was no exception to this. Rayna supported him in ways that transcended his own life and extended into his memory. And our history, in our Talmud, in our Mishnah, in our Torah, it doesn't always acknowledge the important contribution and legacy of women in our tradition. However, today, we know better. We've seen all the amazing things JLS has done for our community, for instance. We would not be the Jewish people we are today without their contributions. And Rayna's contributions to our community transcends generations. And it is something that we all share and love. We all know we've all heard stories and experienced the cheesecakes and have helped prepare. And she has shared her experience with JLAS, and we've all benefited from her illustrious contributions to our community. We would not be Temple Israel if not for her contributions made to our community. Without her support, vision, and guidance, we wouldn't be who we are today. In describing my introduction to Rayna as my first priority to meeting with congregants and coming here, I'm establishing my own foundation at Temple Israel. It is part of our vision for the future of the temple and of our community. And similar to as we talk about in this week's Torah portion, in the same brushstroke that our Torah returns to the basics, to the roots, to the foundation of our people, we need to return to the basics of Rabbi Goodman's vision and Rayna's vision and legacy of this temple. I'm talking about menschlichkeit, food, culture, inclusion, and identity. They're at our core, and these qualities are becoming rarer and rarer today. With the advent of technology, it has become harder and harder to actually be with people most of the time. But it is central to who we are as people, more than ever before. The experience of living this past year under COVID, it has accelerated many trends that we already were seeing in our society. And now, more than ever before, we live in a world where we have quite literally shut ourselves in. We've developed speed, but left us with want. And more than anything else today, we need humanity. We need something beyond cleverness. We need gentleness. Without these qualities, life may be literally inhospitable. Live streaming has brought us closer together here today, and that's a perfect example of that. The very nature of that invention, it cries out for the goodness in our shared humanity, for us to want to be with one another, the unity of us all. And even as we may sit in different states at home, we're all brought together in this one room together tonight. Yet it is the call for unity of family, of food, and of being together which brings us all here together today. And these qualities, they were successful in our past, in our congregation's past, and they are vital to our future as well. Although I'm saddened sometimes that I never had the opportunity to meet Rabbi Goodman face to face, I feel honored by your active presence at our temple. It was truly basheret, as I understand it, and as we say in Hebrew, your relationship with one another and with our temple family. And I look forward to honoring that legacy here at Temple Israel and following in your footsteps with our temple family into the future. Kenya Yiratzon, Mazel Tov.